For my project, I research how children's and adults' attribution of moral judgments to human and supernatural agents. The purpose of the study was that the study was designed to test how children ages 4 to 7 and adults judge intentional versus accidental moral transgressions. Whether they think these agents, either a generic person, PAT, and God, judge these transgressions similarly or differently. The study asked that researchers examine how children ages 4 to 7 and adults think different agents, themselves, another person, and God, judge intentional versus accidental moral transgressions. They tested three possibilities: the self unique, people think their own judgments differ from others; God unique, people think God's judgments differ from human judgments; and agent similarity, people think all agents judge the same way. The study's design was that participants heard short stories where a character caused harm, either intentional, where they wanted to cause harm, or accidental, where they did not want to cause harm. After each story, participants judged: should the actor get in trouble? How much trouble should the actor get in? How another person would judge the actor? And of course, how God would judge the actor. What kind of punishment each agent would give, open ended, and the sample size of the participants were 53 younger children ages 4 to 5, 42 older children ages 6 to 7, and 84 adults. In the study, they found that everyone cares about intent. Across all ages, intentional harm was judged more harshly than accidental harm. Even 4 to 5-year-olds showed clear intent sensitivity when intent was explicitly stated. Research results showed that children gradually shift from judging based on outcomes to judging based on intent. Children often assume others' minds resemble their own, including God's. Around age 6, however, children began distinguishing God's mind from human minds in some domains, example of knowledge, but moral beliefs may develop differently. Why does this matter? Adults usually judge intentional harm worse than accidental harm. Young children often focus on outcomes but can use intent when it's made very clear. Children often assume others think like they do, including God. Religious teachings portray God's mind as different, making God a good comparison target. Everyone distinguishes intentional harm from accidental harm. This is the strongest effect, that intentional harm equals harsher judgment. Even 4 to 5-year-olds reliably use intent when judging. Children treat all agents similarly, both younger and older children. They expect themselves, a generic person, and God to judge transgressions the same way. They do not differentiate God's mind from human minds in severity of judgments, and this supports the agent similarity hypothesis. Younger and older children did not distinguish among their own judgments, another person's judgments, or God's judgments. They assumed everyone thinks like they do. They rarely attributed emotional or spiritual reactions to God. Adults believe God punishes less harshly than humans. God responds with emotional spiritual reactions, examples of forgiveness, guilt, and prayer, and humans respond with more physical or verbal punishments. This supports the God unique hypothesis. Adults see God as more benevolent, less punitive, and more emotionally and spiritually responsive. The ability to distinguish God's moral perspective from human perspectives develops gradually, continuing beyond age 7. Younger children anchor on their own minds and extend those judgments to others, including God. Adults hold a more theologically correct model. God is morally demanding but more benevolent in punishment. Distinguishing God's mind from human minds in moral context emerges gradually, later than distinctions in factual knowledge. The importance of this study is that this research helps us understand how children learn to interpret others' moral judgments, how religious concepts shape moral reasoning, how ideas about God evolve across development, and also suggest future directions. Study responses to good behavior, not just wrongdoing, which was in this study, explore cross-cultural differences, and examine how religious backgrounds influence these judgments. This study only focused on punitive responses, not praiseworthy behavior. The sample size was mostly white, Christian, and U.S. based. The future work could explore other cultures and religions, how children expect God to respond to good actions, and how moral judgments vary in societies with different norms about intent. Young children anchor their own minds with reasoning about others, including God. Adults differentiate God's minds from human minds, viewing God as more benevolent, less punitive, more emotionally or spiritually responsive. And this suggests that the ability to distinguish God's moral perspective from human perspectives develops gradually, continuing beyond age 7. And understanding how children think God responds to wrongdoing may illuminate how religious concepts shape pro-social behavior. Future research could include the examining of responsive praiseworthy behavior, cross-cultural differences, and investigate how religious background shapes these judgments. Thank you.